We all know there are a million different ways to make a living, but on this show, we are curious about those businesses that you might not know about. We're going to take a deep dive every week and talk to a successful person in their field to learn about how they got their start and how they continue to make it in their space. Join me and learn more about the business of. Welcome back to the business of procurement, here with Dave Pennino of LogicSource. So welcome, Dave, to the business of.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the basics. What is procurement to people who might not know?
So it's actually more complex than people realize.
Yeah.
So if you think about any business, businesses have to buy a substantial amount of goods and services just to be in business. So today we happen to be in a brewery. They have to buy their core product, obviously, which is the barley and hops and all the things that go into their product. But then they have all these other things they have to buy just to be in business. Sales, marketing, facilities, maintenance, distribution, logistics, IT, corporate services like legal, consulting, etc. And it can be quite daunting in terms of how many categories it is. And in a typical business, to put it in perspective, about 20% of revenue equates to procurement, the things they have to buy. So it's a large number for most corporations.
Yeah, that's a huge expense that people are putting into this. So how did you get into this as a business? Tell me about your journey, and then let's talk about also how you started LogicSource. But how did you get into procurement to begin with?
Sure. So I grew up in IT. I worked for firms like Gartner down the road here in Stanford, Deloitte, Scient during the dot-com boom. And so I was an IT person by background and trade, but I found it fascinating how large professional services firms like IBM and Accenture and Hewitt, Aon built large-scale business process outsourcing, tech-enabled businesses. And I thought, where else in the enterprise could I do that and at scale? And I just thought, simply put, buying things just made a lot of sense for a large-scale tech-enabled services company, essentially a kind of corporate Costco, if you will. You know, if we bought in volume for multiple clients, we could drive massive economies of scale and kind of lower prices for all of our clients and help them fund, innovation, future growth, new product lines, new geographies, whatever it may be. So, I built a business plan and told my wife I was going to quit my job, and I printed about 17 PowerPoint slides on Newbury Street in Boston and walked into Bain Capital, and they put me in a holding tank, and about 20 minutes later started patting me on the back and hugging me and said I had the money. So I started from literal scratch, 17 PowerPoint slides 13 years ago.
Wow. So how did you decide that you wanted to go into business for yourself versus joining a company that's already doing this, or are you first to market with this sort of company?
So two real questions in there. I think in terms of wanting to go into business for myself, I've always wanted to. I was the kid that was running around with the shovel and making money, shoveling everybody's driveway. I grew up on a street in Norwalk, Connecticut, down the road with a temple on the left side and a Baptist church on the right side. And on Saturdays during the Sabbath, I would get a quarter to turn on everybody's stove. And I just always liked working for myself. I had a landscaping business through high school. And I've always set goals. And one of my goals was at 35, I wanted to own my own business. And my father was a role model in my life. In my 35th year, called me and said, "Hey, you said you always do what you say you're going to do. You're 35. You haven't started the business." So I thought, man, I went and built a business plan. I went and built a business plan, and off we went. So I don't know if I thought it all the way through, but there you go.
When we come back, we're going to learn more about how you started your business from the ground up.
Great.
So we're back on the business of, and today we're talking about procurement with Dave Pennino from LogicSource. So people really seems like it's the heart of what you do in terms of helping people, creating a company that's built around the team that you've been able to build. Tell me more about that being such a passion for you.
Yeah, so one of the things that's been really cool for me in building this company is that we actually are headquartered in a building that was an abandoned building when I was a kid. And I used to literally run around and cause trouble in that building and fish on the river nearby. And at some point it was an artist colony, and then someone came in and revamped it. And we're the largest tenant in that building in the town I grew up in. So we've put 235 jobs in the town I grew up in, and we're going to add about 135 more this year. We did a really cool deal with the state of Connecticut. We contemplated leaving at one point, and I might be the only person you've ever met who fired Texas for Connecticut. And we've actually doubled down on Connecticut and put a bunch of jobs there because, frankly, when we looked at the workforce around the country, there were probably 40 places that we could have gone that would have been, in theory, cheaper, but the talent that's in the greater New York City area was unmatched by far. So it's been really cool putting jobs in the town I grew up in, and I take a lot of pride in it.
Yeah, I would too. And since you started your business from this 17-page PowerPoint, how did you hit the ground running? Like, where did you go from there? Yeah,
so thank God, and anybody who started a business from scratch who doesn't say this is lying. I did 102 stupid things. And thankfully, I did 104 smart things.
Oh, well,
so I'm net positive, but for a long time, it was real close. We have built a business so we are the procurement department, to put it in perspective. So we buy for Lululemon, Gap Inc., Big Lots, Titleist, Acushnet, Ocean Spray, Bountiful Company. We are either some or all of these major brands, procurement department. And you can't just rock up to a corporation, knock on the door and say, hey, let me take over a function of your business with like 3 people and a trick duck.
Yeah.
You have to earn the right over time. So we went into a lot of businesses that were more distressed at first and kind of earned the right. And, eventually got big enough and got enough spend leverage. We have about 52 billion of spend running through our company that grows at about 10 billion a year. And that that took 13 years to get to the point where we had that kind of data, that kind of market intelligence, and kind of power in the market where, we can literally move markets the way we move spend around for our clients. And the other bit about helping people was really cool during the pandemic. We kept people safe. And I never thought when I got in this business that would be one of the things we did. But when you have retail clients like Lulu and Rite Aid and Big Lots, if we didn't source PPE, if we didn't get masks and gloves and blast screens for registers and sanitary wipes, they couldn't stay open.
Right.
So we kept them open, we kept them employed, we also kept people safe, which is kind of cool.
That is a very cool thing to be able to say. And you mentioned the pandemic. Did that help, or did it hurt, like kind of skyrocket your business knowing that supply chain issues are real and such a pain these days?
Yes, I get asked this all the time. It's interesting. We took about a 40% revenue hit in the first 2 weeks of the pandemic. So right off the bat, we took about 4 bankruptcies, clients that are gone forever.
Wow. That
the pandemic shuttered them and they're gone. So day 1 of the pandemic, I lost 40% of revenue. So I would say, no, it wasn't helpful in that regard. We made a decision as a leadership team that we wouldn't cut 401k matching, we wouldn't cut benefits. We said if we have to fire or furlough people, we're going to do as few as possible, and we're going to bring them back as fast as possible. And we're going to put the business in a position to thrive. So we never talked about survive, ever. We always talked about thrive. So we just kind of buckled down, had an awesome board that let us do that. And we came out the other side. We actually started 2019 at the exact same revenue we finished 2019, and about 30 employees more. So we went down 40% of revenue, came back up, and all of our employees contributed in helping us do that. And in lieu of bonuses, we gave everybody 8% of the company to incent them to keep going. And with limited exception, we didn't lose people. And we traded businesses that went bankrupt, that we loved, and we hope and wish that didn't happen,
right,
for businesses like Lulu and businesses like Titleist and really healthy businesses. We also diversified and went into healthcare with brands like WellSpan Health and US Radiology and National Vision and Rite Aid. So, I'd say in the round, I'm not happy the pandemic happened, but
I don't think anybody
considering, so it didn't help us, but considering you had to deal with it, I'm really proud with the way we dealt with it, the way we came out the other side of it.
Yeah, sounds like it. We're going to take another quick break, and we'll be back with more about procurement. And we're back on the business of procurement with Dave Pennino from LogicSource. So Dave, tell me a little bit more about, you said you had 102 mistakes that you've made. So tell me about one of those mistakes and what you kind of learned from it.
Sure. I think there's a couple that stick out to me. I think first and foremost, I think trusting your gut as an entrepreneur is really hard to do. And letting something play out long enough to know if you're right or wrong. And I think there's times in early stage businesses where you get very jumpy, or I guess you'd call it the yips, where you need to trust kind of heuristic modeling and let something run long enough to see if it's right or wrong before you react. And I think we got jumpy, if you will, in kind of 13, 14, 15, where we kept trying things, not giving them enough time to play out, and then changing our mind. And that can be really erratic for your clients, your colleagues, et cetera. So I'd say trusting our gut and sticking with a direction and giving enough time to get enough data to know if you're right or wrong is probably the biggest mistake we made. I think the second biggest mistake we made is a mentor of mine once said, failure is self-solving, it's success that'll kill you. And we didn't prepare for success the way we should have. And maybe somewhere deep down, we didn't believe it would happen. But in our business, we run major functions of corporations. And it's like the dog that caught the fire truck. If you aren't ready, you might win one and break it. And for us, we broke in an absolutely fantastic manner a deal in 2014. It was really a monumental kind of sea change for us. And it was an inflection point where we realized we have to focus more attention on service delivery and quality than we've ever done before. And maybe actually tone down growth to make sure that we had the best delivery model in the space. And so I think that mistake of not respecting growth and being ready for it, I'd say was the second. The third thing I would say is that we listened too much to advisors and not ourselves, because we know the business,
right?
And we really needed to diversify. We were retail heavy, and we love our retail clients, but we have the healthy, awesome, growing retailers. And for a really long time, we had a lot of distressed retailers. So we were constantly taking churn from bankruptcies and from private equity transactions. And we knew we had to diversify, and we listened to advisors, and we should have stood our ground and not done that. And I'd say those three things are the biggest lessons that I've learned over the last 12 years.
Very good lessons to learn, I think. Trusting that gut reaction that you're having is definitely super important. It sounds like that's kind of a common theme for all of those things. Yeah. So where do you see LogicSource going in the future? It seems like procurement is an ever-changing business, especially given all of the current, the macro climate right now. Tell me a little bit more about the IT portion of the business that you
Sure.
guys are kind of pivoting into.
Yeah, it's a great question. So first, I truly believe we can be a category of one in the procurement space. I think there is room in this market for the IBM, as the IBM is to IT, or Accenture is to finance, or Hewitt Aon is to HR. I think LogicSource can be the brand of one in procurement. I really think we can do that. I think we can become the utility companies look to say, I need to save money, improve process, reduce risk, innovate around this space, and I'm calling LogicSource. And I think that's where we're going. And I think the brands that we're winning are proving it out. I think you'll see us do a lot more in automation because we're underwhelmed with the technology that's on the market. And pardon me for being a little edgy, but we kind of compete with two parties. On our services business, we see a lot of consultants.
Okay.
And I love consultants, and I used to be one. But consultants have two problems when it comes to buying stuff. One, they don't buy anything. And two, they don't do anything. So they tend to say, like the security monitor commercial, there's a robbery,
yes.
But I'm not a security guard. They tend to say, hey, there's a savings, or hey, there's a problem, but they don't necessarily do anything to fix it. So our services business goes and does dirty fingernails, roll up your sleeve, fix the problem, and take credit when it's done,
okay.
Not for the idea. What we're finding in the technology business is most of the technology that has been sold, which is a lot of it, in the procurement space is built by kind of flip-flop wearing California punks that left Stanford a year early and never operated a day in their life. So they're building slick technology that isn't to steal from GM years ago. It's not commercial grade.
Okay.
It's not what professional procurement people need to do their jobs. It's like slick Amazon.com-y kind of procurement software to buy stuff, but it's not battle-tested, true procurement software. So we've been underwhelmed trying to partner with these technology offerings, and we've decided we need to build technology for practitioners, by practitioners, and it needs to be fueled with actual spend data and actual procurement tools. One of our clients said to us that the procurement technology that's available in the market today is highly configurable, which he figured out finally means empty. The technology is highly configurable because there's nothing in it. Right. And we're trying to infuse, enrich. For example, a spend analytics tool that just organizes your spend is interesting. But if you bring 50 billion of other spend so that you can see, okay, I know how much I'm paying for my packaging here at the brewery.
Right.
But if there's $1 billion of other companies' packaging, I could really learn how I could lower the price of that. So just knowing what I pay for it's interesting. Right. But I probably already knew that.
Right.
Figuring out what it should cost.
You already don't know.
Yes.
Right.
So we want to build technology for practitioners, by practitioners, that's cheaper, substantially, than what's on the market. It just works better. So I'd see us go there. Yeah. And I think you'll see us go a lot bigger in data, because the amount of data we have, we haven't even scratched the surface on what we could do with it.
And what would you do with it? Like, how can that really help drive the business forward?
So think about the kind of stuff. We know what everybody buys, who they buy it from, how much they pay for it. We know why they buy it. We know who buys it. And the stuff that we buy isn't the secret stuff. So
it's not the secret spot, like the secret seasonings in Kentucky Fried Chicken stuff.
Correct. It's the stuff that we would call indirect or goods not for resale, or that stuff isn't of a strategic priority to them. So they don't mind if other people know. Yeah. So the things we could do around win-loss analysis for suppliers to figure out, why am I not winning more business? We could do interesting things with financial markets. We know what retail sentiment is pre-Christmas across multiple retailers based on their marketing spend. Nobody else knows that. Right. But we have data nobody else has. So I think we could do some pretty interesting things with them.
Sounds like it. Tell me a little bit more about how the procurement business is changing right now beyond the IT.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I mentioned I grew up in IT. So to date myself a little bit, folks, when I started my career, there wasn't a CIO. Chief Information Officer, or Chief Technology Officer. Right. There was an MIS director. They pushed an AV cart. They had screwdrivers in their pocket to fix their Xerox machines. When everybody went to work, they pressed down to go to the data center. Everybody else went up. That MIS director realized, I got to start talking about innovation and security and omni-channel. And they put a suit on, and they gave the screwdrivers to Xerox, and they gave the data center to IBM, and they went upstairs. And they became the CIO, and they reported to the CEO. And they started talking about real competitive advantage in technology. And today's companies are all competing at some level anchored in technology. Yeah. Procurement is the MIS director, right? When you think about the title in and of itself, procurement assumes someone's made a strategic decision and you're just buying it. Yes. Right? Procurement should be managing the company's money. Procurement should be a productivity engine, right? So that's where I think it's going. And one thing the pandemic did, I think, that was really helpful was companies started to realize we need to be efficient. And we have clients that have assumed, $7 billion publicly traded company that's assumed they have $150 million of problems as it pertains to inflation that they can't pass on to their customers because the customers, they're a luxury good. The customer won't buy. Right. At some point, you have what you have and you'll just go a year without new stuff. So they have to figure out how to take $150 million out of the business without breaking anything. Procurement gets more important when that happens. But I think all of our CFOs and CEOs out there have to start thinking about this as spend management, productivity, not procurement. If you're thinking of this as procurement, then that means somebody's made a strategic decision and you just want them to execute the buy, and that's really an extension of legal, and it's not what you need. So we're back on the business of procurement with Dave Pennino from LogicSource.
So tell me more about how sustainability is going to affect your business and the business of procurement going forward.
Yeah, so it's been a really interesting, so sustainability and supplier diversity have been hot topics.
Okay.
Right.
And are they intertwined? They're kind of...
So I think politically, yes.
Okay.
There are different challenges when it comes to reality in terms of supply chain. So I think first and foremost, what I'm seeing right now on the back end of the pandemic and with inflation on the rise is, with limited exception, a lot of lip service to sustainability and supplier diversity, but I think everybody's just trying to stay open, and they're trying to counteract the ramifications of rising costs all around the globe. So regrettably, sustainability and supplier diversity can often mean higher costs. So in the face of inflation and employment challenges, et cetera, it's hard to also prioritize those things. And I think there's a disconnect between the consumer, who I think politically wants to see more from their favorite brands, and the reality of what those brands are facing to just get products on the shelf and to get employees in the stores and get employees in the factories and warehouses. And I think there's just a disconnect. And I don't think, frankly, the media is doing a very nice job explaining that disconnect, because I think folks sit in their living room and they're ordering things on Amazon, and they'd really like to see more of these things that socially they feel really passionately about, but they haven't really taken the journey on how that would work. So for example, supplier diversity is kind of a hot topic for me, because I believe that the problem is legislation and nobody's talking about it. So what it takes to be a diverse supplier in the United States is materially unfair. So to be a diverse supplier in the United States, you have to own 51% of a company, okay? So if my company employs 43% women today, and we can do better. We want to get over 50. 3 of my senior leadership team are women. Doesn't count. Doesn't matter, because I am not considered a diverse individual, and my private equity firm is not considered a diverse entity. So it doesn't matter if I hire 100% of my employees from what are considered diverse backgrounds. It doesn't count. It should count. We should want corporations to employ people from diverse backgrounds, not just have an individual own it. So think about public companies, doesn't count. Private equity, for the most part, with limited exception, doesn't count. Venture capital, with limited exceptions, doesn't count. So everybody wants to see more supplier diversity. There aren't enough diverse suppliers, because what it would take to own a company of any size and scale is really hard to achieve. So I understand the goal, but I think how this country's getting to that goal needs to be fixed. And I think it's a legislative matter. We have to create tiers of supplier diversity where if your company employs a certain level of folks from diverse backgrounds, that should count. And today it doesn't. And what that means is most of the diverse suppliers out there are asset-light businesses. So you could start a PR firm. In fact, we employ a PR firm that is a diverse supplier because it's not asset intensive. They have employees, they don't have all this equipment.
Right.
But you're never going to see a air conditioning manufacturing company be diverse because of the amount of assets you would need to have. It can't be public, it can't be private equity, because they're not diverse entities.
Right.
So I think that's something that we need to improve upon here in the States. On the sustainability side, the problem today is it's more expensive.
Yeah, everything is more expensive.
And it's even more expensive if you want everything to be sustainable.
Right.
So we have to figure out how to make the cost of sustainability cheaper. And look, getting everything delivered to your door, folks, in an Amazon box,
Right.
and each box is this big, and what they sent you is this big, and you ordered 6 things on the same day, and you got 6 boxes, is not sustainable.
No, it's not.
And free shipping is not sustainable.
Especially for small businesses.
At some point, it seems like every bad movie where Samuel Jackson plays the bad guy, it seems like Amazon Prime is going to be that. One day it's going to be $7,000 a minute to have Amazon Prime because everybody else will be out of business. So all those poly bags and all those cardboard boxes and all that tape and all that gas driving to your house to deliver.
Right. And multiple times a day, because if you have 6 different packages, they're not on the same truck.
Correct.
Most
And do
likely.
we really need
Right.
the Windex tomorrow.
Yes, my windows are dirty. I want to do it tonight, which means I'll get it tomorrow and I'll do it in 2 weeks.
There you go. So I think sustainability is a long way from being what we need it to be. And I actually think, again, the social aspects of consumers that think they want it are the same consumers getting 7 Amazon boxes a day and don't understand how bad that is.
Right. So is that changing consumer behavior, or how do we go about educating about that?
I think it's education. I don't think people understand.
Yeah.
You know, when you go to the supermarket with your recyclable bags and you walk with your own 2 feet and put everything in your cart and you pack your car in your bags, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
When you have them ship everything,
except I walk to the grocery store.
they're even better, right? So if you have them ship everything to your house, or you pay for somebody to go shop for you and drive it to your house, that's sustainable.
So sustainability is a huge impact, and I think it's education to the consumer. But when it comes to procurement, why would a company choose LogicSource to do this instead of doing it in-house?
It's a great question. In some companies, it really makes sense. You know, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Walmart, they're of such a size and scale that they can justify the level of category management they would need to be good at this. But think about, put procurement in context for a minute. Just think about a client of ours that we're very proud of, like Lululemon. So you've been in a Lululemon store.
Yes.
So if you think about it in your head, right, you kind of close your eyes and go through that Lulu store just mentally. Take all the clothes out. There's flooring, lighting, there's body forms, there's packaging, there's a credit card swiping machine, there's music playing, there's a dumpster out back, there's air conditioning,
There's trash bags, there's things in the back for the
There's technology that runs everything, right? So the amount of categories that they would need to have internally to be able to buy. There's waste management, there's floor care, there's IT. So to duplicate what we do, because we have a center of excellence in Norwalk, Connecticut, that's organized by category, distribution, logistics, IT, et cetera. And then below IT, for example, you have software, hardware, services, and below that, so we have 100+ people that Lulu can take and use. Okay, I need a waste management event to negotiate my rates, and when I don't need it, I can put it back. If they tried to bring it in-house, they'd have to own all those capabilities. So typically, it's about 0.8% per spend under dollar spent under management that you need to have to run a procurement department. We operate at about 0.6%.
Oh.
So we're cheaper than trying to do it yourself. And if you do it yourself, you only buy what you buy, and you only see what you see. So not having any intelligence from outside your four walls will lead you to be kind of stovepiped over time. It's not that dissimilar that if you leave Costco, the paper towel spend goes up, right? Because they got you a bulk discount, and if you leave them and buy one roll, the cost per roll is going to go up. Right. It's kind of the same model. But there's definitely times where we have clients that are just big enough and have enough scale that they want to do it themselves. But they can still benefit from the technology and from the data, which can enhance and enrich what they're doing.
Well, thank you so much, Dave, for joining us and teaching us all about the business of procurement and its ever-changing category, because it's a nuanced category, and there's so many different things that we've got to learn about today. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.